Hi.
So we'll wait a few minutes to just allow more people time to get in. And I'd say maybe a couple minutes after, then we'll get started. But thank you all, my panel, for being here. Thank you to our guests for being here. And like I said, we'll get started in just a couple of minutes to allow people time to trickle in.
I saw the post that you all did on Instagram today, or you might have posted it yesterday. I saw it today, about finding apartments and things, and it was really good.
Thank you. Courtesy of our media cohort and ambassadors. They really help us a lot with the marketing and things like that. And of course, none of this will be possible without Beth, our communications person. She definitely is like, I love her. So thank you, Beth.
Thank you.
All right, I say we can go ahead and get started. So first, everybody will introduce themselves. My name is Celine Terry. I'm a coordinator in UT for me. I'm one of the student program coordinators. You've probably seen my name, especially if you are in College of Liberal Arts or College of Nursing, because those two are the students that I mostly work with. All right, now I will pass it to Willow.
Hi, I am Willow Lucas. I am one of the financial aid officers for the UT for Me program, and I assist students, all students, with financial aid and budgeting issues.
All right, Paige, will you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Paige Mellencamp McCourse. I am the Assistant Director for Off-Campus and Outreach within New Student Services. So my job is really to help our off-campus student population orient to living off-campus and connecting with the Austin community, as well as still feeling a part of the UT community as well.
Okay, thank you. Autumn.
Hi, my name is Autumn Druyatis. I'm a sophomore and I'm also a peer ambassador for UT for Me.
All right, Nadia.
Hi, I'm Nadia. I'm a peer ambassador as well. I'm a sophomore neuroscience major.
All right, and Beth.
Hi, everyone. Oh, looking at the wrong camera. I'm Beth. I'm the communications coordinator for UT for Me. My video is just on because I'm the host of this meeting. I won't actually be participating, but it's nice to see you all.
Thank you all to my great panel that is here, and Beth, that is our person behind the scenes. So thank you all for being here. And also to our guests, thank you for coming to this event, because I remember when I was a student and trying to find an apartment on campus or off campus, I was like, what is this process? What does this look like? And so this was something that we felt that students could definitely benefit from. And so I want to let you know that we are not here to find you the perfect apartment, but we want to make sure that you know how to go and do that, and also know of resources and things like that, and just kind of some of our panel's experience with finding an apartment and things like that here in the Austin area. So I have an icebreaker I want to get started with. So participants in the chat, because we know that this can be kind of a scary process. So if you can use one word to explain how you are feeling about this process, let's see what it is. We just want to kind of gauge and see how you're feeling. Like, what does this make you feel? Okay, stressed, nervous, confused, overwhelmed, panicking, overwhelmed, frustrated, overwhelming. Well, from the looks of it, you are not the only one that is feeling that way, and that's perfectly okay. Trying to find balance. So hopefully after this, you will feel a little bit less stressed and feel like that you have some good tools and good resources to help you navigate the process when you start looking for an apartment. And once you all, whenever you register, you send in questions. And so I printed out some of those questions, and we're gonna kind of use those questions to kind of gauge the panel. And y'all had a lot of questions, so thank you for your questions. I don't want to forget, but for registering, we also have 2 giveaways that we will give out. Honestly, you'll probably get it after spring break, but there's going to be a raffle for 2 winners. And it's going to be a gift basket, literally a basket of items that you can use once you move into your new apartment. Also, the big items in these baskets, one will be a Keurig and the other will be an air fryer. So, I mean, I kind of wish that I can win because I don't have an air fryer, and I think that that would be great. So, yes, so good luck. And again, it will be a random drawing for 2 people. All right, so let's get this party started. All right, we definitely had a lot of financial questions. So Willow, I think you'll probably get a lot of these. But one of the big questions that I saw was, like, what if I'm in need of more financial aid, like going towards housing, and like, how does that work?
Yeah, that's a good question. So of course, everybody knows that housing in Austin is pretty expensive and it's been going up, unfortunately. But there are resources. So typically for housing, you're going to be looking at student and or parent loans because that's kind of the way it goes. However, if you are applying for scholarships, which you should all be doing, scholarship deadlines are coming up, then those funds can also be used for off-campus housing. So essentially any funds that come in to the university that you've earned through scholarships or through loans or anything like that can be refunded to you to use for off-campus housing. So if you're looking for additional funds, today actually, or yesterday, Travis County rental assistance opened. So it is open for people who are making like 250% above the poverty line and the national poverty line. So I think most of our students and some of their families will actually qualify for that. So that's specifically here in Travis County. I think that runs through September. So there is that. Additionally, a lot of the apartments here have SMART funding. They are SMART housing. So I don't know if any of you guys have heard about that, but that is I believe, an income-based affordability, housing affordability thing that they do here to help with the cost of housing. So, you know, I don't ever really want to recommend that students take out a whole lot of loans more than they need. But, you know, housing is one of those things that loans can be helpful for. And, you know, it is an investment in your education. So if that prevents you from having to work, you know, 40 hours a week and still be able to focus on your school, then, you know, that's an option that you may want to consider. Additionally, local resources can be found on findhelp.org. And that is a website that has lots of different resources for various things based on your zip code. So that's a pretty easy one. And then also Foundation Communities here in town offers housing assistance for, you know, families. And I don't know that they have anything specifically for college students, but, you know, all college students are in different situations. So some students may qualify for that housing, and it is a affordable housing program. So you do have to have some form of income in order to qualify. But that is pretty much what I've got for additional resources.
And also, I will say, don't feel like you have to remember everything that everybody says, because for one, this is, of course, is being recorded. And also, we can gather all the resources, and because we have your emails, we can send you out a sheet that has a lot of the resources that we talked about today. So don't feel like you have to remember everything. All right. I do have a poll question. That I'm going to ask. First, I want to see, has anyone, have you signed the lease yet? All right, and I'll give y'all some time to answer. Okay. All right, I think that's everybody. So most of you have not signed a lease yet, and a few of you have. Okay, good to know. And so I know one big thing with leases and things like that is the type of different leases that we have that are available. And Paige, if you want to talk about some of the lease options, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. So typically there's two different types of leases, either a joint lease or leasing individually. So kind of the difference between those two are just, you know, who is responsible at the end of the day for rent. And there are pros and cons to each. You just kind of have to know who you're renting with and things like that. But so let's do joint lease first. So if you're signing onto a joint lease, that means you and the other people renting in your unit are signing together, saying we as a whole are responsible for the total rent each month. So clearly there's some flexibility of, you know, you could, somebody has the smaller bedroom or not the private bathroom, you know, you can make accommodations for how much people owe, things like that. But yeah, you're really relying on others that you either know very well or maybe don't know very well, that are, you know, at the end of the day, the landlord, the property owners, they're going to just know whether they have the full rent amount or they don't. And that they're not really going to be super interested in who did what and who owes what. It's a total number, and you are all on the hook for that number. As opposed to an individual lease where you are renting a space in an apartment, and this is any apartment you're where it's just a 1 bedroom, 1 person, it's already an individual lease. But some apartment complexes rent by the bedroom. So you're renting, just your bed space or your room or whatever that looks like. The lease you're signing, you are only responsible for your own rent, even if you live with others. So if somebody isn't making rent, doesn't really affect you besides, living with that person, and that might be stressful on them and things like that. But in the end, you're not getting notices or problems with your credit or things like that because of missed payments. So yeah, those are kind of the two differences. Like I said, both have their pros and cons. Just on the bare minimum, having an individual lease is kind of nice in that you have more control over the overall situation, but you just kind of have to go into each situation, see what works best for you.
The most famous of talking while you're on mute. Autumn and Nadia, if y'all want to talk about what kind of leases that y'all have, please let us know.
I have an individual lease, and I actually did look into like joint leases, or like one of the leases I was looking at was an individual, but you pay all utilities and stuff together. I personally wouldn't do that just because I'm living with people who are like my super good friends, and I think that can get a little complicated. So I personally have always stuck to an individual lease, and I would recommend one, especially if you're living with people who are super close to you, but it just depends upon each situation.
Yeah, so I have an individual lease as well. And I actually did not look at joint leases. I thought that individual lease was like the best for me. And utilities are included in my individual lease, so I don't have to worry about kind of talking to my other roommates about like TV usage and things of that matter.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so going back into these questions that we have, and I apologize because if you hear a little person in the background, she loves to sing, so that's what's happening. This is what happens when you work from home. All right, so I'm gonna put up another poll question that talks about the area. So what area are you planning to live? All right, so looking at the poll, so about 25% of you said West Campus, a few said North Campus, but the biggest percent was wherever I can afford, which totally understand, and then some people said other. All right, so now we can kind of talk about, so when it comes to looking in different areas, because one of the questions was about, like, is it worth it to move to Riverside because it's a little bit away from campus and it's affordable, or what do you think? And especially this may be more to you, Paige, and the students, about location wise, and how does that affect student experience, I guess, with living in each area.
Yeah. As with a lot of these questions, I think what we're going to be echoing a lot is it really depends on the person, which I know on the user end is a little frustrating because that means more decision making and we're trying to make life easier for you all. But what I am going to do is put in the comments. So this is our neighborhood breakdown of, if you're not familiar, of where these student neighborhoods are when we talk about Riverside or Far West. These are the areas that generally people are talking about. And it also, if you hover over the different areas, it'll tell you what students typically live there, maybe like the pros and cons, although we word it very neutrally in there. But yes, so living close to campus, so living in North or West or even East campus, of course, makes the commute a little quicker, which allows students to find desirable. Usually comes with a higher price tag. As we mentioned, there's smart housing. A lot of that is in West Campus because the whole program for smart housing is this deal between, and I think it's important to know this as a student. So typically apartments are only allowed to have so much density or only allowed to build so high. So they make a deal with the city of Austin that they can build higher and have more units if they offer a certain percentage to students or to people that are under a certain income. So that's why the SMART program exists. Those units have to be, equal amounts. They can't be just the units that are, don't have a good view, or the smaller units, or they have to be kind of equally spread around the complex. So I think that's just important to know too, for all of you. So West Campus can have some good deals in other areas closer to campus. It's just, a little harder to find. Riverside is definitely seems to be the most affordable of the neighborhoods. But more and more that's not the case. Like there's a lot of gentrification happening everywhere in Austin, and apartment prices going up everywhere. So we certainly know that it's not easy to find reasonable apartment rents. So we certainly understand that. As far as like the commute, deciding whether it's worth, the commute from Riverside and things like that, you can always look and see where the UT shuttle stops are. If they're close to your apartment complex in Riverside or elsewhere in Austin. That's important to note. I also will be the first to acknowledge that there was recently a Daily Texan article about accessibility of those shuttles and them not running as timely as they have in the past, which even that some students would probably not be super happy with how frequent they were running. So I just want to throw that out there too, that there can be bus troubles and things like that to consider as well. But if you're the type of person who likes to pack up early, come to campus early, hang out, and just kind of hang out all day, that can be a good option as well. So that's kind of my 2 cents. And I think an important thing to do too is we used to talk a lot about student neighborhoods and still do, but COVID, I think, has really shown us that you can live anywhere you want. You don't need to feel restricted by these like neighborhood lines. You can feel empowered to live anywhere you want. I live up in Pflugerville and I used to make the commute every single day. I wasn't super enjoyable, but I did it. And I loved my job and I didn't plan on leaving just over the commute. So all that to say that you can live wherever you want. It's really about the experience you want and your budget. And that's, of course, super personal.
I had a question, actually. What about 12-month leases versus 9-month leases? And students who are staying in campus or in Austin all year round versus only for the academic year?
Yeah. Some apartment complexes do short-term leasing, and you can ask them individually about that or extending a little bit or all those fun things. A lot of them are going to lock you into more of a 12-monther. And some people are traveling for internships and things like that. I did want to put I'll link to it here in a second, but we have a subleasing platform on our page Because that can be a really good way to not be on the hook for that like May, June, July, August rent. And maybe somebody who's moving from on campus to off campus but wants to stay in Austin can work with you on that. So yeah.
Thank you. And then Autumn and Nadia, if y'all want to give your perspective of what area that you live in and what made you choose that area.
Yeah, so I live in West Campus. I really chose to live here just as far as convenience because I thought about parking and everything like that and taking the buses in the morning. Because I just like to have a gap in between my classes where I can go back to my apartment and get lunch. So like as you're living like a little bit further, that's a little harder. And then if you're planning on driving to campus, you also have to think about parking costs. So those are just like different things to take into account that I did. And I just like added all the different costs up. Like I would recommend just creating a board. That's what I did, just like a board of all the different apartments I like and get kind of an estimate of what it would be and see if just the extra money is worth it or not. Personally, for me, I thought paying a little bit of that extra money a month just to live closer to campus and have that convenience was worth it for me, but it's different for everyone. So I would just look into all the different options you have.
Yeah, so I live in West Campus right now. I don't think I weighed all my options, to be honest, mainly because I was kind of from out of town, and West Campus was really all I knew because I just had friends who lived in West Campus. As far as convenient, it is very convenient. Sometimes I will forget stuff and I'll be able to just walk back to my apartment because it's only like a couple blocks from campus, which is really great. So if you're someone who thinks that would be something that you like, definitely West Campus is probably where you should go. But as far as like Riverside, like if you don't mind taking the bus every once in a while, keep in mind that some of these buses might run a little bit early or even a little bit late. So you gotta like take that time into consideration to get to class. But yeah.
Thank you. And so since we're talking about apartments in areas, one of the other question was, do any of these places allow someone who is not a student to live there?
I would say very few, sorry, my son and husband just got home. Very few places restrict only students to live there. A lot of times there'll be more of the private dorm style apartments. So that'd be like your Castilians, Dobie, which is now on campus, but pre-on campus housing. So those places might have some sort of restriction where you need to either be a UT student or a student, ACC or St. Ed's or whatever around town. So some will restrict, but most won't. Most will be happy to have renters, whatever that looks like. And especially the further you get away from campus, you'll see more of a mix of people. I think Riverside is a good example where, sure, there's quite a few UT students, but you're really part of more of a Austin-y community, whereas places closer to campus can just kind of feel like an extension of campus, even though you're not on the 40 acres.
And I think Paige, this one will probably go to you too, but it was basically like, what is the difference? And I'm trying to watch the chat as well. So if you have questions as they come up, definitely put them in the chat because I'm trying to watch and kind of tie it all in. But one of the questions was like, because I know you mentioned like Dobie, which is now part of campus. So what's the difference or big differences between like off-campus housing versus like, okay, now we have Dobie that is considered like on campus, off campus, like how does that work?
Anyone can feel free to add to. I full disclosure, is not a student at UT, but I have been here for almost 4 years now. So these are my observations and things. But I kind of think of housing on a spectrum of support. So I would say on-campus housing, like true, like in a residence hall on the 40 acres, that has the most level of support. And I used to actually work in housing at a different university. I'm a huge proponent of it. I think it's a great way for students to get plugged in and all of that. I was also an RA, so big fan. And then your next level of support, I think, are those university apartments. So 2400 Nueces. There's actually a collection of apartments called university apartments. And then now the newest one being Dobie. So someone asked about that, but the university went ahead and acquired, so bought Dobie this last year and went ahead and took over operations. So those students essentially started off as private leasing individuals off campus, not part of the university, and then halfway through are now suddenly kind of on campus students. So that's fun. But yes, so now those students, I think, have like a little bit of independence, but still like the employees there are university employees now. There's like maybe a higher level of accountability because we're state employees and things like that. So you can kind of be able to, I don't know, a certain level of service and being able to hold people accountable because of who we work for. Next, I think would be private dorms, which is like the Castilian and Dobie pre UT buying it. So those kind of try to recreate what it feels like to be in a residence hall, but it's still private business. They're not affiliated with the university, but they're kind of trying to give you that same feel with more like community, maybe an RA-like figure. And then you have apartments, like straight up just apartments, what you think of when you think of a traditional apartment, no meal plan. You probably have a full kitchen, all that fun stuff. And of course, that's a lot of, more responsibility if you're ready for that level. And then lastly, it's kind of a curveball one, are co-ops. Cooperatives are the like long, but co-ops for short. And those are kind of community run residence halls, but they're not part of the university. But students actually put forth like a lot of the effort. Let's say there's a dining hall, you take on cooking shifts, or you do maintenance, or you sit on a board and make decisions about the community. All of that like community effort equals lesser rent. So if you see any co-ops like in West Campus, those will typically have less rent, they'll be lower in rent as well. But that has a lot of responsibility because now you're picking up kind of like a side job that isn't exactly paid for because it's subsidizing your rent. I hope that answers it, but feel free, especially students, to chime in with what you thought.
Do our students know anything about the off-campus, on-campus apartments?
Just like going off of like off-campus, on-campus apartments, if they are on-campus, off-campus university-like apartments, it gets a little bit more, I feel like they have to follow certain guidelines. So that would be the only thing I would say. I know one of my friends was living in a similar apartment like that. And during COVID, a major thing was they could only have one guest per like apartment. And so they didn't really like that. I think that again just goes into like your preference, and just if you live off campus, you just have more leeway with that because they can't really enforce that on you because it's private. So yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. So I feel like one big thing that people are wanting to know are, where are the good deals? Like when is the best time to sign a lease? And also for our students, like when did you sign a lease and things like that? So this is open.
So I can't speak to any university housing at all because I don't have any experience with that. However, I have lots of experience at finding apartments for myself here in Austin. So I have found that if you are looking for a straight, like 1-bedroom apartment and you have a budget and certain needs and things like that, use an apartment locator. They're free and the apartments pay them and they can find you deals. So my apartment locator, like I was looking at an apartment and at the last minute she came through with this deal that was like $100 off this other apartment in the same complex. And so I was able to get the better deal. So, and that prevented me from having to spend so many hours trying to look online at various apartment complexes, because then they want you to call for information instead of posting their prices online and all of that stuff, especially right now, because yeah, they just have that policy, a lot of them. So, I mean, they'll give you ranges, but a lot of times they'll be like, call for a price. So the apartment locators, like I said, they get paid by the apartment. So like when you're filling out your lease, it'll ask you, did an apartment locator help you find this and what their name is? And then they work it out between them. So there's no cost to you, but it's been very helpful for me finding apartments to get an apartment locator.
Just adding on to that, there's no perfect time to look because the deals change. You lose, like you can look really early and you might not get the best deals if you don't wait till like the end of the semester, but then at the end of the semester, you obviously are not going to have as much options. So definitely if you know where you want to live, or like for future reference to, like, let's say this year you signed somewhere and you really loved it, I would just re-sign like early because they tend to sell out, especially if they have a good deal going on. But I would just watch it and like see the deals and just start looking at places pretty early so you get an idea of more or less where you want to be and what kind of rent you're looking for. And the more places you tour, I also think the more leverage you'll have when making your decision, because you just have more options and know what you really want. And then another thing that I would try to do, and most apartments won't do it, but it doesn't hurt to ask, is to ask for a best rate guarantee. So that's like, let's say you sign early. If you ask for that, you can use the fact that you're signing early as leverage. I've heard it being granted. I tried, they did not give it to me. It just depends, but it doesn't hurt to ask. And basically what that means is that as like the semester goes on, if your rate gets dropped lower, you get that rate because you have the best rate guarantee. So that's just something that's super important, especially if you're signing early, because you have more leverage to use that as. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to branch off a little about what Willow said about the apartment locator. I know at UT there are students called housing scouts, and they will essentially try to help you in your apartment finding situation. They will try to find you the best deal. I did not use one when I was signing my lease. I had just come to Austin and I was just walking into apartments and just asking, hey, can I have a tour? And then they'd give me tours, and then I would just hop from apartment complex to apartment complex, and then essentially decided like which one was right for me. But if I would have done like the whole process again, I honestly probably would have used a housing scout, just because it takes a lot of stress off my shoulders, because it is very hard to look for apartments. And I would also go on like Google Maps and try like looking at all the apartments on West Campus, and it was just very time consuming. So housing scouts are definitely out there to help you.
Yeah, it's very good to hear the student perspective, because we also say a lot about, depending on how picky you are, if you have like a place in mind, you're going to want to start early. But in the end, a lot of times, I don't know if anybody here is a transfer student, you're getting decisions a lot later than the typical incoming student. And there's always apartments available. Might not be exactly where you wanted, might not be exactly the price you were hoping for, but we are not going to run out of apartments, it doesn't seem. So don't feel like you're up against necessarily a deadline or anything like that. But yeah, once again, comes down to personal preference. And yeah, I haven't found any like correlation to a best time to get a deal. We generally tell students that go into winter break getting serious a little bit about your search and start, looking at places you might want to check out early in the spring. But even if you're starting right now, you are not behind. It is okay. You will find an apartment. So don't worry too much. And I'm also going to drop a link and actually send it to everybody. We do have a marketplace. We don't have any, like, I can't link to Housing Scouts, but our students can, if you want to. But I can link to our marketplace, which doesn't do that much work for you, but it does have some pretty cool filters on it to help you narrow down.
All right, and so this next question, which Autumn, you brought up in something that you were saying, someone asked, what do they ask like when they're on a tour?
Okay, so my brother is a senior, so going into it, I didn't even live on campus. I lived directly off campus because I just like already knew a little bit about it, and I didn't want to live in a dorm. But I've done it for 2 years, 2 places now, and the questions that I realize that you have to ask is, one, ask if they'll give you a best rate guarantee. Ask about smart housing. That's especially if you qualify for any sort of financial aid or you're not sure, just ask about it and apply. Like, it does no harm. It will honestly help you. Especially if you're planning, like, you want to live alone, I would definitely look into smart housing because a lot of apartment complexes are doing like 1x1s or studios as their smart housing. And so that would be perfect because it's like your rate drops like a good amount, and that's extra money in your pocket or like money that you don't have to spend. I would also ask if like utilities are included because that's not everywhere. Some apartments include it, some apartments don't, and you just like pay a bill, and the like simple bills is a big one that they use, and it automatically splits it up between like each room. Or there's some where you have to get it through Austin's waterworks and stuff like that, or electricity. So definitely ask about if Wi-Fi is included, utilities, just stuff like that. And then I would also recommend just touring, like no matter what, going and seeing the place and looking at the utilities, because, well, not the utilities, the amenities, sorry, because the amenities are a big part of it. You would think like, just think about it, like, am I going to use this? Do I want this? Because definitely like having an amenity of study rooms is super nice. A pool, personal preference, I thought I would use my pool all the time. I don't at all. So definitely that's just stuff that you have to think about, and just ask what amenities they have and fees about the amenities. Some apartments charge an amenity fee, like they charge extra. Ask about windows in your apartment. That's a super big thing. I would not recommend getting a room without a window. My roommate has one now, and she does not like it because she said it messes up her sleep cycle because she doesn't know when it's daytime. So definitely that's stuff to ask about. So yeah, I don't know if Nadia has any more questions that she asks about when she tours.
Yeah, no, I feel like you hit like almost like all of them. I think the one last thing that I would ask is about like any safety features that they have. That was a big thing. I was touring with my mom and she wanted to know like how safe was it for me. And like my apartment complex, there's a security guard like at like the front desk, and he walks around the apartment complex, I want to say like a couple of times every hour. So that was really nice. And then I also think like your key fob, when you get into the elevator, some apartment complexes will just kind of let anybody touch any of the floors and it will take you up there. Other apartment complexes like mine, I have to key myself for like, we have to key for every floor that we want to go into. Other ones you can just key once and then you can just select how many floors you want. So yeah, I would just ask about safety.
Yeah, just adding on to that too, that I forgot. If you are planning on bringing a car, that is a super big thing to ask about what parking options they have and if they have parking available. Because parking, for some reason, the apartments just don't think that they like sell out of parking pretty fast. And like it's not a super big deal breaker. Like sometimes people put parking just in case if they decide to bring their car, which I would do. Like just if you're hesitant on the fence about whether you're bringing your car next year or not, add parking because it's always so easy to get it off of your like lease because just everyone's always looking for parking. So yeah, that's just the last thing I want to say on there.
I think those are all good points, especially like thinking about safety, because that was also one of the things like safety issues that was listed in the question. So that's good. And parking is another thing because we know parking on campus is kind of crazy. So I can only imagine what that looks like living off campus as well, especially like I've kind of driven down by West Campus a little bit. I'm like, oh, this is a lot. So I can only imagine what parking is like there. Even in my own apartment complex, sometimes I'm like, all these people cannot live here. Like, so I wish we had like more like visitor parking compared to like where the residents park, because I don't have a assigned parking spot because I'm like, oh, I don't need that because I can typically always find a spot. But sometimes like coming in late or whatever, I'm like, dang, I gotta park a little bit further, which further is probably like an extra 50 feet, but whatever, it's further than right there in front of my apartment. So thank you for definitely pointing out parking because that's important, especially if you have a car. Along the lines of looking for an apartment, going on a tour, one of the questions was like if you can sign without a guarantor, and also kind of what kind of items do you need to take with you whenever you're signing a lease?
I can talk a little bit about guarantors. So a guarantor, if you're unfamiliar with that term, is really kind of the root of it is guarantee. So someone who is going to kind of co-sign with you on your lease, guaranteeing that they're going to get rent. Guarantors are usually required a lot of times for students and student housing, but also anyone who, when you prove how much money you make, doesn't meet a certain level of income. I forget if it's like 3 times what rent is or something similar to that. A lot of students are not making that money, which is why most students need a guarantor when signing for an apartment. So a lot of times it would typically be a family member, but not everyone has, somebody that can sign with them as a guarantor, or the adults in your life might not have like the credit needed to be your guarantor. So there's lots of situations like that. What I typically tell students who don't have a guarantor is to reach out directly to the apartment complex, the apartment manager. And I think a lot of times like a nice letter, a really good email can go a long way. Kind of just stating your case. You don't need to overshare. Don't feel like you have to disclose anything you don't want to, but just explain like you don't have a guarantor, but this is what I'm willing to do, or how can we work together on this. Sometimes you could, offer to pay a couple extra months up front. Once again, these are not easy things to do, and I do want to recognize that. You can offer to pay more monthly. You can, there are private companies that are kind of popping up that can sign as your guarantor. Of course, that's more money you're paying somebody as well to sign as your guarantor. So yeah, I just want to recognize that it's not easy, but I think you have better luck with smaller apartment complexes and more privately owned. So like, for instance, no shade, but American Campus Community is a very big company, and maybe they would work with you, but it would be easier maybe if you're somebody local being able to reach out and just state your case, and they're maybe checking their email a little bit more or something like that. So yeah, just some thoughts there about guarantors. And then yeah, things that you'll need, documents you'll need. I haven't been asked that in a while, but typically you're going to need to at least know your social security number. They're going to maybe run a background check on you. Some sort of state ID is good for those type of situations. And they're going to need your guarantor's information. They'll probably need to like fax or scan a copy of the lease to them. So just kind of have your guarantor in mind. But I have not signed a lease actually in a very long time, so I will let other people field more of that.
So piggybacking off of that, sometimes financial aid can be your guarantor. If you know you're getting a large refund check because you're living off campus, and your financial aid, instead of going to pay on-campus housing, will be refunded to you in a large check at the beginning of the semester. So sometimes that can be anywhere, from $2,500 to, $8,000, depending on how much financial aid and loans you have. In those situations, I have provided information with student consent to, for the student, like a letter to the student, not to the apartment complex itself, but like to the student that says what their financial aid is. Alternately, you can print off your financial aid award notification and indicate which part will be going towards tuition and what your refund is going to be. So if you are in a situation where you don't have a guarantor, you can email them, especially if you have financial aid, because it is typically guaranteed, and say, hey, I don't have a guarantor. However, I can pay the whole semester up front because I have financial aid, or things like that. And so that has been useful for some students in getting housing without guarantors in the past. So, and then in addition to that, in general, if you are getting a large financial aid check because you're not going to be in on-campus housing, you need to budget that carefully, because you've got a minimum of 4 months of housing in the fall, and you've got 5 months of housing in the spring, depending on your lease. And then depending on whether or not you have a meal plan and all of that stuff, you need to make sure you are going to be fed and clothed and etc. So it's really important, especially if you've not ever managed your own money before or things like that, to create a budget for yourself, know how much you want to spend, know what your financial aid refund is, figure out if you're going to have to work or not, how many hours, and things like that, so that you can really get a good idea of what you could actually afford.
Just piggybacking off of that, one thing I would recommend, not even just like if you're trying to like get an apartment without a guarantor, at the beginning, when you get like your financial aid back, if your apartment allows you to do this, and a lot of them do, pay for the fall, pay the month upfront, because it's a lot. You're going to get caught up in schoolwork, you're going to get caught up in social life. And I don't know, I personally, I set an alarm for the first of the month, but when I found out that I could just pay it all in full for the month that I have with my financial aid, that was amazing to me, because I didn't have to worry about being late and getting late charges. And then it also helped me to see what I have for the rest of the semester and how I can budget that, by monthly basis or by weekly basis, however you want to do it, to know what I can spend and what I can't spend.
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm
so
going to echo that one more time. If you have the money, pay all your rent up front, because that is your biggest expense and you do not want to be homeless. Just say.
yeah, so I'm just gonna kind of extend off of what everyone was saying. I actually did not have a guarantor, so my apartment complex, they made me pay the last 2 months of my lease plan. That was just kind of locking me into the lease and kind of making me obviously pay every month.
Yeah, and just one last thing. I would say most apartment complexes make you pay for the month of August, even though you don't move in until like probably like the middle of August. So my financial aid never comes in before I have to pay rent. So definitely expect to pay the first month's rent out of pocket or like through loans, and you'll get it back through your financial aid depending on like how much you receive. But just expect that because financial aid doesn't usually kick, or you don't get your reimbursement until like a week before school, maybe less. So that's just something to think about too.
That is great info. And it's funny that you said pay it all up upfront, because it's been a while since I've been like as an undergrad student. But that is definitely what I did. I honestly, like my very first apartment that I lived in, they knew it was basically student housing, but they knew that students were going to pay with their refund check. So the first month, like if you looked at it, you think that you had all these extra fees, but they're like, don't worry about it. Just whenever you they actually let us wait until our refund came and let us, so we like back paid. So that was super helpful. And then I paid up. I even paid, I remember, granted, it wasn't Austin, it was Nacogdoches. So price is definitely different. And it's also 10 years ago. But I was able to, and fortunate enough to pay even like basically January as well, because of course then January is kind of like August because you don't have that money. So if you can even pay January, I say, because then you're covering yourself for that month as well. So thank you for that. And then a couple questions that are in the chat. So we will definitely we'll get the Housing Scouts info and add it to the one-page info that we're going to send out with all the links that we talked about today. So be prepared to get that once we send that out. And then one question was, how would we go about basically like paying, knowing how much that you would get back when you don't know how much you're going to get for the next semester, I guess, in terms of financial aid? So how would you gauge that?
Well, so financial aid, and for should be all the students here, or most of the students here, are covered under the Texas Advanced Commitment. So you know that all of your tuition is going to be paid with grants. After that, if you have any Dell scholarship or outside scholarship or loans, those are the things that are going to be refunded to you to use. So you would take the total amount of financial aid that you have accepted, and then subtract your tuition from that. And that should give you a good idea of what your general refund is going to be. If you have specific questions about that, you can always make an appointment with the financial aid office for UT for me, and we can help you figure that out as well.
Thank you for that. And we will also include, in case you don't have it, we'll include the bookings link. So that way, if you have more questions about your financial aid and how to look into that, you can definitely schedule appointment with Willow or Chris. Chris is our other financial aid officer that is not here with us today. But we have a team. We are definitely, we're all here to help you and support you in any way that we can. Looking at some more of the questions that we have. What are our best ways for finding a roommate, and how does that work with having roommates or finding people to live with?
Okay, going off this a little bit, roommates really just depend. My first semester here, I got randoms and I thought it was a great thing. I was super excited for it. But some people don't have the best experience, but most places have surveys that they fill out and it will give you kind of an idea of what you want, what you don't. Like they'll ask if you're okay with pets, if you're not, what are you morning, night person. So they try to match you the best, but definitely if you have friends that like you made in your first year or that you're thinking about living with, definitely start talking to them and being like, hey, do you want to go tour places? And do you want to look at this place or what's more or less your budget like that we can stay in? And that is a super great resource, like just asking people that you know that you're like, oh, I would love to live with this person. This person's so cool. But if you don't have that, that is okay. They have like little surveys you fill out, and I always thought they were like fun because they ask you fun little questions about yourself. So they try to match you as best as you can, but of course they're not you. So if you can find people, that would be amazing. And also on Facebook, most classes have like UT24 Facebook or UT25, and that's a great place to just be like, hey, I'm living in this apartment next year. I have this bedroom plan and everything. Is anyone else like looking for a roommate or looking for a place to live? Like, would you like to like, and just reach out and just post it and see if anyone comes back, talk with them, see if they're like, oh, I really like this person. I can see myself living with this person. And then that could be a way that you find someone to live with too. There's a lot of various routes, but don't worry if you do not have someone to live with like right now. You will find someone.
Yeah, so I actually did random, and my experience, it has been okay so far. I honestly, personally wouldn't want to live with my friends because it's much easier to tell somebody that you're not so close with that, hey, they need to pick up the trash or they need to do the dishes once in a while. When you have a friend, it's much harder to just tell them that. So, I mean, with the random roommate process, there could be a lot of cons to that because again, you're living with a complete stranger. So it honestly comes down to just who you are. Are you more like lenient? And then again, when you like Autumn was mentioning, you can fill out like all your preferences for a roommate, and then they can match you up as best as possible. And if you do have issues with your roommate, I know if you can just talk to management about that. At least at my apartment complex, we can talk to management, and they can sort something out. So, yeah, and then there's Facebook Marketplace to look for roommates, and also I know you can try to. They have like the UT accounts for like every class, and you can on Instagram, so you can try to find them on Instagram as well.
Yeah, and just going off the friend thing, I think it depends on you personally and like who you're planning on living with. I'm a really bold person, so I don't mind telling my roommates like, hey, clean your dishes. But it just depends on again the person and if you feel comfortable enough with who you're living with.
They're so true. Um, so I put in, so we do have a roommate finder. I think I counted up, we have 18 listings right now, which is the most we've had so far. So if you want to look around at roommates there or post yourself as a profile there, feel free. It's behind an EID login, so it's just other people with EIDs, but still, be mindful of what you're posting out there. And then I posted tips for finding a roommate and vetting a roommate. They're, like ask the hard questions, be really uncomfy and give them a phone call or meet in person in a public place, just so that you can make sure you're working with who you think you're working with. Can't mitigate all your risk, but it's good to cover as much as you can. And then also on that page, we have our roommate agreement. As somebody who is a residence hall coordinator for many years and an RA, roommate agreements, while they might feel a little stuffy and a little forced, are really important. So please, if nothing else, please fill out some type of roommate agreement. I always like to call them living documents. So you fill them out maybe your first week or two together, create boundaries with each other. It's very healthy. But also revisit them in a couple months when like new things that you didn't think would bother you are very much bothering you. And I'm sure they probably feel the same way about you if there's that much tension. So it's important to revisit them. Yeah, so my 2 cents about roommates.
Yes, roommates can definitely be, I want to say hit or miss. Personal experience, my first apartment, I lived with one of the girls was friends with one of my friends. And so I like knew of her, but I didn't know the other person. It was like a 3-bedroom individual leases. And so honestly, like we had so much fun, like got to know both of them really well. We had a great time. We did a service fraternity together, so that was cool. So definitely a good friendship that came out of that. Until this day, we still refer to each other as roomies. And granted, it's been forever since we lived together. And then I lived with one of my friends, and that turned left after maybe a few months. And so I was like, I'm not living here. I talked to my apartment, our apartment manager, and I was able, instead of breaking my lease, I was able to move into a different apartment, and she had to find somebody else to move in. So that was an experience, but I didn't have to break my lease. So that was great. Now, granted, we're friends again now and we laugh. We look back at it and laugh, and we really don't know why we fell out. But you can fall out with your friends. So that's why it's always, hit or miss.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Just going on what Paige said in the chat. Yeah, it's okay if like you do not have this ever-ending bond that you create. Like my first year, I like talked to them in passing, but we're not best friends. But I did not hate, I like loved living with them. I just like, as soon as I got my footing at UT, I knew who I wanted to live with, and that happened to be like my friend. But I had a great experience, and I mean, we didn't have that like never-ending friendship bond, but it still was amazing. So it's definitely nice if you get that, but it's not like oh my gosh, like I'm gonna hate living with them because we're not best friends. No, that's definitely not the case. It's better to have someone that is like respects your space, and you're able to say, hey, like, can you please do this, and it not be awkward or not any like little pettiness between it, than to have someone who you literally hate living with.
Yeah, because it is no fun to live with someone that you do not like. Did that for like a month and was like, let me out of here. So we've talked about a little bit about the apartment process, looking for an apartment, things like that. So one of the questions which I thought was great was, okay, so now you're living in an apartment and something happens, like something goes wrong, something breaks, you find mold. How do you handle that?
Okay, going off this, most apartments have a like residence portal that you can report anything like maintenance oriented. And if you're not really sure like what it is, just be as descriptive as you can. And most of the time they'll come in and figure it out. But that is definitely, when you're looking, I think that's something to look into, like read reviews about management. Don't expect to have amazing management for student housing. You're not going to. Like there's decent ones, but it's not like going to be amazing. Like they're not going to respond super quickly, or not going to answer your every need, or like they're just not. But definitely look in the reviews, because there's some really bad ones, and then there's some that are like, okay, they do the bare minimum, and that's all you can ask for.
Yeah, kind of going off of what Autumn said. Yeah, so there's maintenance for that. And then I think one of the questions asked about why are there so many bad reviews on Google? And a lot of that has to do with the management, not necessarily the place itself, that it's gross to live in. It's just how management handles certain issues. So that is definitely something to look at.
I think this is a good plug too of like when I said, for university housing, the accountability piece, this is part of it. Maybe people's experiences are different, but I will go out on a limb and say like the university is going to hold itself to like a certain timeline and knows, that there's a hierarchy and things can get escalated. So things get fixed a little differently. So you might be used to a certain level of service from housing if you live on campus, and that might not be exactly what you get off campus. So that's just like a normalizing our expectations moment. But also if things are really bad, it's also good to know after you've done your due diligence, you've used the portal, you've sent an email, you've called, done all of the things. There are also some resources that you can use both at UT and with the city. So UT has legal services for students, and Martin over there is the attorney that works, and he is an attorney for all of you. So he can help with like a lot of different things, but I think most of his time is spent with apartments and helping look over leases or, things that need to be fixed, that kind of helping you hold them accountable to what is in a lease, what you signed. Now I think I will save him some time with a lot of leases don't say like pool has to be open, like all those things. It is very like your apartment needs to be livable and like there needs to be like a certain level of security. So also before I forget, take lots of pictures when you first move into to document what it looked like before. As far as like mold and things, structural problems, Austin Code, it would be also a really good resource if it gets that bad. They can come out and also hold them accountable for like living condition type things. Once again, not if the pool isn't working or parking gate isn't opening, all those fun things. It's more about like livability of your apartment, but those are two good tools to have.
Yeah, just going off of that, don't be afraid to go speak to management at all. And don't be afraid to like say exactly like how you feel. Like obviously say it in a like respectful way. But a lot of times if you just are really passive about it, they're gonna kind of take advantage of that. So definitely just know like you have a right to speak up. Like you have just as much as a right for anyone. Like you may not be like a whole adult like living with a big salary job, but you just have as much right. And definitely look over your lease before you sign it and use those services. Like if you're confused about what your lease is saying, that's a perfect service to like look over your lease with, because it's important to know like if something's wrong. Like a lot of them have to say like, oh, you have to report it by like mail, and like you can email them, but if something happens, they're going to be like, oh, you didn't send it in by mail, which is dumb. But for legal reasons, it's just important to know what you have to do in like certain scenarios that's listed in your lease.
I also forgot about this, but Austin Code, there's a portal where you can see where what properties have open code cases against them too. So I know we talked about reviews and you have to take them with a grain of salt because of course the most upset people and the most happy people write them and not a lot of people in the middle, but a code violation is a code violation. So that's a little more cut and dry.
All right, and I want to ask, especially for our students, how would you describe your overall experience of living off campus?
I personally love it, but I also didn't get a dorm experience. but I didn't think I missed out on anything. I love living off campus. I specifically love living West Campus. I just feel like I'm so close to everything. There definitely has been some like stuff where I'm like, oh my gosh, stop, you didn't do that. Like, no, fix it. And again, that just goes into like actually state, don't be not being passive, like actually stating like how you feel, what you want. Because I remember, this is a perfect example. My apartment complex now told me I didn't have parking like a week before I was supposed to come with my car. And I was like, no, I know I signed for parking. And you looked at my lease and there was like no sign of parking, but it was supposed to be an amendment after, but it never came. And I never checked to see if it came because it was there. And I was like, no, I know I had parking. Like I wouldn't have signed to pay this much if I didn't have parking. And I looked in and like I went through my lease and I added up all the costs. And sure enough, they had included like the amount for my parking, but they didn't give me parking. And so I went to management and I like showed them, I was like, I have screenshots, pictures of all this, and I have what you're charging me on our portal, what it says in the lease, and the missing amount is my parking. And then the next day I got parking. So definitely it's kind of like a battle. Sometimes you don't have any problems and that's amazing. Sometimes you do, but just say what you like, say, be factful about what you're saying and just don't be passive. Like look through your lease, like, and just work it out with them as best as you can. You're not gonna get like, oh my gosh, this is perfect, like no problems. There probably will be problems, but most of the time they can be resolved in some way.
Yeah, so my experience has been good so far. I wouldn't say it's the best. I have had a little bit of some roommate trouble, but you know, I was upfront about it. I didn't just kind of let it bother me and not say anything. I kind of brought it up to one of my roommates, and she fixed the problem as soon as possible. So that was great. And then with my apartment complex, I have gone to management a couple of times just for little things. When I moved into my apartment, I had signed a 6-month lease. Oh, I had signed an 18-month lease. But I was in one unit for 6 months and then had to be transferred to another unit because the paperwork wasn't written correctly in the portal. And so that was quite annoying. But yeah, so just make sure that when you're looking at your documents, you're reading carefully. I read over my lease multiple times. I wish I had known that there was somebody who would read it with me. That would have been really helpful when the time came down. So if you are going to read your lease, maybe use that source. But I read my lease and I want to say there was some wording that I just felt like could be interpreted like another way. And so I called the person who wrote my lease and told them to fix it because it wasn't very clear. And they did. So I was really grateful for that.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, I know we've been on for a little while, but I want to open it up. If anybody has any questions that they want to put in the chat that they feel like that haven't been answered, or if they still have questions about some things, feel free to do so. And I'll be checking to see if I see anything in the Q&A or the chat.
I'm just going to say something while you're doing that. And it is not, well, it's only tangentially related to housing. So for the last couple of years, students have been receiving HERF funds, okay? And we've been giving out money left and right because the federal government has been giving us money left and right. However, the last money that you received is it. There's not going to be any more HERF funds that we know of at all in the future. So if you were using those funds to help pay for housing or other expenses, please know that you are not going to get those in the future.
All right, so I see one in the chat. It says, should I talk to legal services about not having a lock on my door? I'm going to say absolutely, because so when I signed my lease in my apartment, I literally like line by line. And one of the things, like some things that they're just like, oh, we're not really responsible for as long as it's livable. But one of the things that they are required that was in my lease was basically security, because if you don't have a lock on your door, how is that not secure? So definitely, yes, speak up about that.
So as far as I saw it pop up in the chat about scholarships or grants specifically for housing, there aren't any that I know of that are, large grants that are specifically for housing. However, some community foundations or organizations that you may be members of may have funds available for their members for certain things. You can always ask about that. But no, not so far. I'm still looking. If I find anything, I'll post it on the Canvas page. But so far I have not found anything that is specifically for housing. So if anybody else finds anything that is specifically for housing, please let me know so that I can also make sure that everybody else knows. But yeah, not so far. So unfortunately.
The only thing I could think of was, it's not really a scholarship. I'll put that out there. But so the summer internships through the Vice President of Student Affairs area. And unfortunately, this window has closed. We're already doing interviews for this batch of students, but maybe next summer. If you live on campus, they cover your housing, or if you live off campus, they give you a stipend to help with housing. So kind of a workaround, but having a position with them helps provide you with money for housing. And also, if this is not Austin related, but if you ever have an internship that is underfunded or not paid, Texas Career Engagement also has an internship fund, which you might have heard of from this group before, but just keep that in mind. That part of that is if you're moving to a different city or whatnot, they can help with housing costs sometimes too.
One question is, when would be the best time / of the year to make the switch to off campus? I say for me, so when I went to college at my school, I was required to live on campus until I had 60 hours. I know that it's not the case for UT. So I would say whenever you feel like that you're ready for the next level of responsibility. But obviously, if you're living on campus, definitely recommend finishing out your housing contract, and then looking, for that next school year.
Going off of what someone asked about any specific apartment. So I like just finished looking and signed. But I would definitely, if you're looking for a more affordable options in West Campus, I would look at the blocks. There's like several of them. And then 2215, especially if you're like not having a car, because 2215, you have to park like at a separate parking garage. So that's kind of annoying that you have to get like a separate plan with like that parking garage. But if you're not, that's pretty affordable. So yeah, there's only like two options that I noticed that are super affordable. And then I love how someone put their Instagram in the chat about roommates.
Awesome. I feel like we tackle all the questions. I know I said this was going to last to 7, but I feel like, we got a lot of information covered, a lot of great information. Again, thank you so much for the panelists for being here, for sharing your input, your expertise, your advice. This would not have went over without you all. I told Beth before, I just like to come up with the ideas and I like other people to implement it. So y'all have definitely helped me in making this program to be a success. Thank you for all the students that have came today and stayed on with us. Remember, your EIDs are going into a drawing. And so we will have 2 lucky winners of some great prizes that you can use in your new future apartment. I seen somebody slid in with one last question.
And I have a couple of things I wanted to say.
Okay, yeah, and I will definitely turn it over. I guess we'll go with this question and then I'll turn it over to you, Willow. And if anybody else has anything they want to add, whatever you want, you can have the floor. So it says, I've seen some apartments don't have laundry amenities. Is there anything to do about that?
Of course, there's things like, laundry mats, or you could, beg a friend, bring them, lunch and have them let you do your laundry there at their apartment. There's also some like space saving, like small laundry things. You can like, as much as you've probably never done it before, there's like DIY things. If you look on like TikTok or YouTube videos of how to like make your own washing. It's very green. So, there's some benefits to it. It is kind of rough though. So I can understand why, that's kind of a bummer not to have in unit. And that is something to check when you're looking at places. Is it in unit laundry or where is the laundry located? Good question to ask. And a thing that you kind of forget about when you're like caught up in the excitement of looking at apartments.
Agreed. That's one of my things. Like, I need to have my laundry in my apartment. For one, I don't like to do laundry. And so if I need those clothes to sit in the dryer for an extra 2 days, don't judge me. Just let them sit and I will get them. All right. So I will pass it to you, Willow.
Okay, just a couple of things. Hopefully, all of you guys have already completed your free application for financial aid for next year. If you are having any issues with it, if you have not completed it yet and you have questions about your dependency status or your parents' income or any of that stuff, you can make an appointment with us or shoot us an email for that. Continuing students, financial aid award notifications are not going to go out till June this year. So in regards to, finding out how much you are going to have for financial aid, again, most of the students in this cohort will have their entire tuition paid for. And then any scholarships and or loans that they have gotten on top of that to use for housing. So if you want help with budgeting, figuring out how much money you have coming back in your refund, whether or not you even need loans, all of that kind of stuff, you can always, shoot us an email or make an appointment with us and we can go over those things for you individually.
Also, I'm sorry, I'm gonna do a little plug. We are also on bookings, me and Nadia and a bunch of other ambassadors. If you guys ever want to meet with us and talk about apartments or anything other that you just have concerns with, we're also there. We want to meet with you guys. So
Cool. I just put my thing in the chat, but we also have an Instagram. We're trying to build more followers. So, this is my shameless plug. So if you want to follow our account, we do a lot of tips on there, but we also advertise for our events. We just had like an emergency kit event where we gave away free weather radios and first aid kits, water containers, very timely. Our first event actually got canceled because we had a freeze. So I'm really good with timing with these things. And then we do fun ones like we went to East Austin and did a mural walk, a street art walk, and then went to Easy Tiger afterwards. So lots of fun events. So yeah, we'd love to connect.
All right. Well, again, thank you all for spending your lovely evening with us. I hope that you all got some really great resources. Again, we're going to send out the resources to you later. Again, thank you all for coming. I hope that you all have a great night and see you soon. Bye, y'all. Thank y'all for coming. Thank you again, Beth.
Oh, yeah, this was fun. I learned a lot.
And I guess, is it still recording?
Yeah, I'll stop the
Okay.
recording. After stopping, you'll see